Hello, 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 and welcome to a Tuesday evening live stream. Thank you all so much for joining us. My name is Natalie. I'm a criminal defense attorney, and welcome to the channel. If you could be so kind as to get comfortable, take your shoes off, like the video, we are going to be discussing a very interesting topic. And for that interesting topic, I have a very interesting guest. So, because I'm a bit late, I don't want to take too long with this. I'm very excited. Welcome to the channel. I'm going to say it. Aaron. Hello, Aaron. Welcome to the channel.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for being with us. You guys should all know Aaron. He's with Growing Up in Scientology. Aaron, I'm going to allow you to kind of intro yourself, but I do want to introduce you to the lawyer chicklets who are the subscribers here so that they know who we're going to be joined by. We're going to be discussing the Danny Masterson case and the Scientology ties to the trial itself and the sentencing. So, having been raised in Scientology, Aaron worked for the organization full-time as a staff member and a Sea Org member from the age of 12 to 26. He held various positions in Philadelphia, Clearwater, and Los Angeles, all relating to training Scientology auditors. Aaron left the Sea organization in 2006 and officially left Scientology in early 2014. Since 2015, Aaron has been educating the public about Scientology and exposing abuses within the organization through his YouTube channel, Growing Up in Scientology. Aaron is the vice president of the Aftermath Foundation, which helps people who are escaping from Scientology and starting their lives in many cases from scratch. Aaron lives in Clearwater, Florida with his wife and 3 daughters. Welcome to the channel, Aaron.
Thank you again for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for reaching out because I think as soon as we concluded our stream a couple days ago about the Danny Masterson sentencing, I maybe received 100 emails, DMs from people saying, you need to contact Aaron. And I said, well, I'll try, but I watch his channel and he's a pretty big deal. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that, but here we are. So everything kind of worked out.
I messaged you actually because I saw
believe it.
I saw your interview and I was like, oh my God, we got to talk about this sometime.
Yes. And I want to talk about it. Okay. So Danny Masterson, long time, maybe lifetime, even Scientologist, star of that 70s show, went on to play on this show called The Ranch with Ashton Kutcher. Lots of friends in Hollywood, very much connected in Hollywood. And it comes out sometime to the public around like 2017 that he has committed offenses of a sexual nature, allegedly at the time, against multiple women. And it was kind of a slow trickle to the public, eventually culminating in his convictions for 3 charges, all carrying, I think, 30 years in prison, of forcible assault of a sexual nature. I'm using certain terms because in the first few minutes of a stream, you have to be careful. And he went to sentencing and received 30 to life. And he received support letters from people in Hollywood, such as Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis, as well as Giovanni Ribisi. And the people had a lot of questions about that. After examining those questions, though, I think, Aaron, the question I really had was, I watched your video with Leah Remini. I've watched a lot of your videos on the subject. I understand that you were in the court at some points in time. What was the influence what did Scientology have to do with, number one, keeping this case under wraps or these cases under wraps? And number 2, ultimately bringing him to justice because it was used as evidence against him that Scientology had intervened and kept the victims from being able to get justice.
Excellent question. Can I make a couple quick comments on the intro info?
Sure.
So 2017 is just when the investigation was reopened into Danny Masterson.
Okay.
And it was reopened because Jane Doe 3 went to the police for the first time. Jane Doe 1, and I'm going to feel really bad if I get the date wrong on this. Jane Doe 1, I believe, went to the police for the first time in 2004 when she was still a Scientologist.
Can I stop you there real quick? Is she the one that went to the police in 2004, and then reached a settlement with Danny Masterson when he had the attorney Marty Singer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
And we can call her Jen. Now, one of the reasons, and it's not like he was found not guilty at that time. That never went to trial. He was never charged with anything because all of the Scientologists involved refused to participate, refused to cooperate. There was nothing the police couldn't build a case. There was no, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So then when additional victims came forward, the case was reopened. And that's why some people go, oh my God, why did it take him so long to come forward? It didn't. They all came forward, or they came forward to the Scientology authorities, Jane Doe 1, Jane Doe 3. So Jen and Chrissy came forward to the Scientology authorities at the time. And Jen took the unprecedented step in Scientology of actually going to the police.
Mm-hmm.
And that's unheard of in Scientology.
Tell us why. Why is that unheard of?
It's considered a high crime, a suppressive act in Scientology to report any Scientologist to the authorities. It's just a fact. And, you know, one of the things that was thoroughly documented throughout this trial, and I'll be careful with the words that I use too, because I know we're still early, is that it was demonstrated clearly that in Scientology, violently assaulting other Scientology women is not enough to get you kicked out. Telling the police that you were violently assaulted by another Scientologist is enough to get you kicked out.
Let me digest.
Yes.
Let me digest, okay? Because I'm not the type to just gloss over things like that. Being assaulted, right? Credibly being assaulted, that's not going to get your assaulter kicked out.
That's right.
But telling on the assaulter, going to the authorities, that will get you kicked out of the organization.
That's right.
So what happens when the victim is a child?
It does not make any difference. There are and that's one of the reasons why this decision, this conviction is such a big deal in the world of Scientology. Scientologists don't believe in or trust or even use the WOG justice system. WOG is Scientology's word for anything that's not Scientology.
What does it stand? Does it stand for something, or is it just WOG?
You know, well, it stands for something like wink, wink. Like it used to be a slur that the military would use for Asians during the Vietnam War and the Korean War and stuff. And so they would say they would jokingly say it stands for worthy Oriental gentleman. But really, it's just a slur. It's just a slur. I mean, in Australia and in the UK, it is a straight up racial slur. But in Scientology, it's one of the most common words that is used in Scientology, like WOG. It means non-Scientologist. It means anything outside of Scientology. I'm serious. I'm not exaggerating at all.
I believe you. I'm just blown. I'm blown. My mind
like
is
Scientologists would even say, like some Scientologists work for the church, but only like during the daytime, right? Or the weekends. They'd be like, oh, I've got to go to my WOG job. It means my regular world job.
That's terrifying and terrible. That's horrible. In my mind, the question that's running through my mind is, didn't L. Ron Hubbard have some military experience?
He was in the Navy.
He was in the Navy. So
he knows what it meant.
Right. But then he creates a religion from his science fiction books and uses a slur that he probably learns in the military, and then makes that like a key part of his religion, that people say that when referring to outsiders.
Yeah. Now, to be fair, some of the Navy people who are watching, and people have emailed me and said in the Navy, the word polywog is actually a sailor who's never crossed the equator. And then once you cross the equator, there's another word that they call you. So people in the Navy are convinced that he used this term from his Navy history.
I got it.
I don't know. The guy knew it was a racial slur. I'm just saying he knew. He knew.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I was saying Scientologists don't trust or have belief in or even use the normal justice system. And I think all Scientologists know what has happened with Danny Masterson. I mean, they're even in Scientology, they are circulating Sean Hawley's statement that this was an injustice and he didn't do this and it's going to be appealed. Like they're doing damage control. If Scientologists didn't already know what happened, they know now because Scientology is circulating Sean Hawley's statement to everybody.
Got it.
So Scientologists are at least going to get the message, oh, justice is possible in the real world. you know. But yeah, see, Scientology sort of has this belief system that ends up being a very self-serving belief system that Scientology can fix whatever it is that makes people do evil, horrible, terrible things, no matter how destructive, no matter whether it's to men, women, children, seniors, whatever. That that punishing someone to prevent them from committing crimes, L. Ron Hubbard would say, "Oh, that's pointless. Why punish them when we can fix them?"
Through
And
Scientology. So Scientology is the solution. Hence, Tom Cruise going after Brooke Shields for taking psychiatric medication for postpartum.
Yeah.
Hence, Danny Masterson himself saying, like, F you if you don't believe that Scientology is basically the answer to everything. That's kind of what he said. Yeah. Okay. That kind of ties together in my mind now. Okay.
Do you happen to remember that crazy Tom Cruise video where he's got the Mission Impossible music in the background and he's wearing this black turtleneck?
Yeah, and it's like Church of Scientology stuff in the background, kind of like gold looking.
Yep.
And he's like, is he like giving like a talk or something like that, and like talking about how Scientology is like the solution to everything, and we're all are we Thetans? What are we?
Thetans.
Thetans. We're all, everyone else is a Thetan, but like they've got the answer, you know.
There's a part in that video where he goes, you know, if you drive by a car accident as a Scientologist, it's not like anyone else. You know, you're the only one who can help.
Okay.
That's what he means. He's referring to the fact that, yes, the EMTs can patch you up and the doctors can set your bones or whatever, but only with Scientology auditing technology can we actually fix, one, what caused you to get into that car accident in the first place, or two, heal whatever mental or psychic scars are remaining from after the car accident. That's what he means when he says
so
that.
He doesn't just mean, oh, you're supposed to change people's tires if they've got flat tires. He's like, no, we will fix everything. And it's only us. Like, wow.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. And when it comes to I'm going to use the word cult here. I hope I don't offend you. Okay. I try to be sensitive of that. But, you know, when it comes to these cult organizations, they always have different language to describe things so that outsiders will never fully be clued in on exactly what it is that they're saying. So I think that's an example of that.
Absolutely.
All right. So go ahead. I'm sorry I cut you off, but it just pinged something in my mind.
Well, I think what I was saying is just that it's a belief that Scientology has that ends up being a very self-serving belief to the organization, because it's the perfect excuse to keep all of your dirty laundry from ever being made known to the authorities.
Got it.
Is that involving the authorities is akin to preventing a Scientologist from being able to apply standard Scientology. And that's a high crime. It's a suppressive act. And that will get you kicked out of Scientology. Viciously drugging and attacking another member will not, because Scientology can fix that.
They can fix the member.
They can fix the abuser. They can fix the abused. But involving the police, that's too far, because now you're preventing us from being able, us being Scientology, from being able to apply our technology to our members. And that's unforgivable.
So does the jury hear, because I know that they had an expert witness who testified, and she was a high up member in the Church of Scientology. Does the jury hear that's kind of like the inner workings, and that you must not go to the outside, you must keep everything inside, because Scientology is the answer for the perpetrator and the victim? Yeah.
So they did hear that testimony, and that was actually one of the big differences. There was two big differences between the second trial and the first trial. And I wasn't present for the first trial, but I was present every day for the second trial.
Okay.
In the first trial, they were not allowed to hear any of that expert testimony on Scientology policy specifically, and they weren't allowed to hear any testimony about the girls being drugged.
And let me ask you this, if you know, my understanding, because I do like to work in the legal side of things, my understanding was that the reason that changed is because the defense opened the door to an expert witness testifying by basically bringing up the defense of late report, right? Late report is something we can bring up because I'm a defense attorney. So in an SA case, if there's a late report, you can say, maybe you made this up because you took so long to report it. And so what they're saying is, they didn't take a long time to report it. They reported it at the time to Scientology, and here's all the practices that Scientology does to suppress the person from going to get actual help because of their belief system, right?
Exactly. The defense in the first case was supposed to focus on whether the interactions were consensual versus non-consensual. And instead they started to, like you said, bring up the fact of, oh, why did it take you 20 years to come forward? And that's when it was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. First of all, not only did it not take 20 years, that's a mischaracterization,
Right.
but let's explain why it took them so long to actually come forward to the police. Never mind the fact that Jane Doe 1 came forward to the police pretty much right away.
Right.
So yeah, the judge said, sorry, you guys opened the door. It's your fault.
Right. Right. That's a big thing, guys. As defense attorneys, it's kind of like a minefield for us. You don't want bad acts or bad information about your client coming out or about anything that they're associated with. But if you bring it up in some way, the prosecution can go all in on it, and it can really hurt your clients. That seems to have been a big mistake on their part.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, Danny's first team already made huge mistakes by bringing Scientology into it in the first place. And then the second defense team made that mistake. So some big mistakes.
Okay. So they heard from the expert. Could you please say her name again? Because I think we said it incorrectly in the last stream. The name of the expert.
Claire Headley.
Claire Headley. Okay. So
and we actually work together on she's the president and I'm the vice president of the Aftermath Foundation. We help people who are leaving Scientology.
Right. And I see she also has her and her husband have a book, and they have a website all about that.
Yeah, their YouTube channel is called Blown for Good. And in Scientology, blowing means to leave without permission, to go AWOL, to escape. And her husband, Mark, when he first left Scientology, was posting on some of the message boards as Blown for Good, like they'll never get me back.
Got it.
And that's the name of his book, is Blown for Good, and that's the name of their channel.
Very good. Okay, thank you. Okay, so during the trial itself, you got to observe the second trial. Can you give us some of your impressions from the second trial?
It's the first trial I've ever sat in on and watched.
Okay.
And I'm fascinated by the legal process. I was awed by the professionalism and the calm demeanor of the prosecutors. I have a bit of a bias in that I was rooting for the prosecutors. I was a little surprised at how, this is going to sound just too insulting, but I really thought the defense attorneys just didn't do a good job. Now you might go, well, compared to what? I don't know. Compared to what I expected. I don't know. The cross-examination, I never felt like they were scoring points on the cross-examination. I mean, the Jane Does have already, gone down this route before. So, it wasn't easy to throw them off, but, and I've tried, because I did video updates like 3 times a day, every day.
Yep. I watched. Yeah, I watched.
And I said, guys, I'm still waiting for them to score points. I may not know what I'm talking about. I grew up in a cult. What do I know? But I'm still waiting for them to score points. And it might just be that they were doing the best they could with what they had to work with. I mean, I'm sitting here as a biased, observer going, I already know the girl's stories. I already know Danny did this. I already know he's guilty. And I'm like, okay, but am I just being too biased on this? I just so wish that the thing had been televised. I don't know why some high profile cases get televised but the 9th floor of the Clara Shortridge Foltz Criminal Justice Center, I don't think cameras are ever allowed on that floor for any reason whatsoever. I don't know the difference. Do you know why?
Oh, I have no idea, because in my state, I'm in Maryland, my state does not allow any recording in there at all. You can sit in and take notes, but you can't record. But I think about famous California trials. Some of them have been televised, but as of lately, the trials we've been very interested in, Weinstein, Masterson, Tory Lanez, that's one that we've covered here. No cameras. So I don't know what's going on, if maybe they changed it or something, but I would have loved to have seen exactly what was happening in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my takeaways, I mean, the testimony was incredibly emotional. One thing that was striking to me was the shenanigans that Danny and his team, Danny, not the legal team, but his friends, his family, the Scientologists, the shenanigans that they would play in the hallways, break times.
Could you tell me about this? I was watching one. I'm sorry. I'm glad you said that, because I really wanted to ask you about this. So I was watching the you guys were getting together after you had come out of court. It was you, Leah Remini, and another gentleman, I can't think of his name, and you were doing kind of like a podcast style, and you were saying how there was an attorney sitting on your side from the Church of Scientology who wouldn't tell you her name. And Leah came up and was introducing herself to everyone, and she was just standoffish. I don't want to give you my name. And eventually she got her first name, and you guys figured out who she was. And then there was the clergyman who who stood up to the judge and said, I just want to make sure that we're protecting religious freedom. And so you asked him in the hallway, like, what are you talking about? Like religious freedom? Like, what does that have to do with anything? Like, why are you intervening in this case as a man of the cloth? And then, like, I think did the bailiffs had to get involved or something? Can you, I mean, when you say there were shenanigans, tell us about the shenanigans.
Yeah. Well, this was misreported by Tony Ortega and Megan Cuniff. But so the shenanigans, let's talk about the priest, the fake priest guy. So
fake priest. Wait, no. When I watched it, you guys didn't say fake priest. Tell me, what do you mean fake priest?
Real priest who was on Scientology's payroll, hired, like literally hired by Scientology.
Because the judge asked him if he was affiliated with Scientology, and he said no.
Which was a lie.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So go ahead.
So, but I believed him. I had no reason to think like this guy comes walking in full priest garb and a big cross. I'm like, you don't see that in Scientology. It didn't even occur to me. And so, but I was curious because I figured, oh, someone's pulling this guy's strings. He must be being manipulated. I want to know what story he was told. And we were talking, like, we were actually just, like, honestly, I didn't think there was any funny business going on. And we're standing in the hallway, and Leah Remini is right there next to me. And I'm actually just having a normal conversation with this guy where he's insisting he's got nothing to do with Scientology, but he's telling me that he's really concerned about religious rights and protection and all this stuff. And then up walks a woman who had been sitting next to me in the media row. And I'd never looked at her name tag before. So I just figured she was an honest to God journalist. And she walks up and just sort of kind of stands a little confrontationally, like right kind of between me and the priest. And I look at her name tag and it says Stand League. Well, that's Scientology's front group. That's the propaganda group they've created. It's only a few years old. They created that group specifically to harass and attack Leah Remini and other people like me. It's not a real organization. It's not a real news organization. It's not a media organization. It's a Scientology front group.
Okay.
And I go, so she walks up and I don't see her name tag at first. And I go, oh, okay. So you're like a religious journalist. He's like the star of your pieces. And then she goes, I'm with the Stand League. And I go, no, I don't know. You've never been in this hallway. Right. It's not a big hallway, but also when court's getting out, it's loud. People are walking and bustling. It's not like we're waiting for court to start.
Right.
So I sort of like, it was a reflex. I was like, oh, you're with her? I was like incredulous. I wasn't angry and yelling. I was incredulous.
Yeah. Right.
I'm like, you just said you're not with them. You're literally here with the propagandist hate writer for Scientology. You're literally here with, and then I said the F word. I said the effing cult. But like, I was being incredulous. I wasn't yelling at the guy.
Right. Okay. Understand.
Now, the bailiff, by the way, the bailiff, I'm just going to say it, Bailiff Brown, not a fan of the prosecution. Not a fan of the Jane Does. Okay.
Oh.
That's yes. So he and I'd also never met him before. He had just come back from vacation that day. I'd never met him before. I didn't even actually know who he was because I'd already had a good relationship with the other sheriff's folks on that floor. Anyway, he comes up. He's also a big, imposing, intimidating guy. Sure. And people could say that of me, but he's bigger than me. And he basically said, hey, calm down, respect for the court and everything. And I just was like, okay, yeah, no problem. I mean, like, no problem. It was a non-issue. But what we didn't know at the time is that there were still jurors who had not finished leaving the floor. Who overheard that there was some kerfluffle.
Okay.
And when we came back from lunch recess, Sean Hawley's team made a big deal about the fact that these jurors have been hearing about Scientology harassing and intimidating the Jane Does, and they're going. The complaint was the jurors are going to think that was an altercation caused by Scientology, when in reality, the only one who made a fuss was Mr. Smith-Levin. And so then they brought out the jurors who heard something, like 4 or 5 jurors raised their hand.
Right.
Questioned all of them about what exactly did you hear. Here's what was amazing. Every single juror who heard something entirely different.
That's how it goes. That's how witness statements go. That's completely normal. Yeah.
And every now and then, Sean Hawley would turn around and be like, I just want to make sure for the record we're speaking about Mr. Aaron Smith-Levin. I'd be like, hi, Your Honor. Like, because I was just so happy to be there. I was just so happy, you know. And what was amazing is that the Jane Does, before this case started, had asked, the second trial started, had asked for the jury to be sequestered, or at least semi-sequestered, so they couldn't be harassed on their lunch break or intimidated. And that request was declined.
Right.
Until the kerfluffle. And then
Sean Hawley raised it to the court.
Yes.
That was a miscalculation.
And then the Jane Does got what they wanted. And look, it was a total accident. It's not like I meant for that to happen.
Yeah, no, of course.
But then the jurors were fed a private lunch in a room in the back. They were escorted in private entrances in and out of the building. No one had any access to them from that point on. And so it ended up being a positive thing, at least for the, you know, the state of mind of the Jane Does, that, okay, we know Scientology's not figuring out how to get to these jurors.
Right. Yeah. Did you at all get an impression of the judge's impression of Scientology's presence in the courtroom? Because it's quite apparent that officials from the Church of Scientology were present in the courtroom.
The judge called them out on it. Not that it wasn't okay for them to be there, but that it wasn't okay for the defense to keep acting like the jury was getting biased in this way against Scientology, biased in that way against Scientology. At one point, the judge said, if you are concerned about the jury being aware of the presence of Scientology operatives in this courtroom, then perhaps you should ask the Scientology operatives not to be present in the courtroom. That's what she said to them at one point. Because Vicky Podboreski is been working for Scientology forever, and attorneys from her firm who have nothing to do with this case whatsoever just were there constantly. And that was the woman you're referring to that wouldn't identify herself to Leah. We eventually found her on Vicky's website.
Right, that she was an attorney for her firm.
Yeah.
And so I see it this way. If my organization is accused of using suppressive tactics to keep victims from going forward to law enforcement, and that same organization is being sued by those victims, I might have an attorney there to listen to the proceedings, especially because it might become relevant to the civil case, right? Like, as putting my attorney hat on, that makes sense to me. But I want to lay real low. I'm not going to be on both sides of the aisle. I'm going to be over on the side that I'm more affiliated with. And I would just have one attorney in there taking notes. You don't want to draw attention to yourself, because the allegation is that you use noisy tactics to suppress the voices of other people, and especially of victims. So I feel like that's a miscalculation on their part, you know. And then it's interesting that his attorney kept invoking that to the court, further drawing the court's attention to it. I don't think that that's a good idea, but that's just me. All right. So I have another question for you. What was your impression of the expert's testimony about what Scientology did to suppress the reporting of the victims to law enforcement?
Like, it was incredibly powerful.
Okay. Could you give us something on that?
And you know, because Claire and I, you know, Claire spent decades working for Scientology, and she was born and raised in it, as was I. So to us, it's sort of common knowledge. We assume people understand these things about Scientology, but you know, the jury doesn't. And it's one thing to hear it from a victim who's saying the reason I didn't do X, A, B, and C is X, Y, and Z, but you're still sitting there wondering if you can believe the victim, you know, because you just don't know. You're sort of taking their word for it. It's kind of just their testimony. And Claire Headley was able to provide expert testimony and quote the references and give plenty of examples. And she has her own horrible story on how her life has been destroyed by leaving Scientology, but she wasn't allowed to get into any of that. It was
right, because she's an expert.
Purely testimony on Scientology policy and what it means, and what are the rules, and what are the penalties for violating the rules. And it's the only time in the trial that I saw all the notebooks up and the pens moving, you know, because everyone's looking at the jurors trying to figure out what the hell's going through their minds.
So this is really important. The jury was super plugged in, like they were taking notes as she was testifying. All of them were.
Yes, and
that's big. That's big.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
Real big. Yeah. If I call an expert as defense and everyone is taking notes, I'm going to feel great about my case. If I call an expert if the prosecution calls an expert and I'm the defense, I'm not, and they're really paying attention, taking a lot of notes, really plugged in, I'm not feeling so good about my trial in that moment, like I'm not feeling so great. So, what can you give us some specific examples of the types of things that were testified to that Scientology would do in order to suppress people's voices or the reporting of crimes by fellow members of the Church of Scientology?
Yeah, well, one of the things that she testified to is what is the actual procedure that gets kickstarted, goes into play when someone comes in and reports a crime like this. And she spoke to that and the fact that Scientology is very much into investigating the precise details of accusations. They don't just go, we don't want to hear it. We don't want to hear it. They investigate it like crazy. You might think like, oh my God, they would investigate it. Like, yes, they want to know exactly what happened, time, place, form an event, who was there, what was said, what occurred exactly. And then they would bring in everyone else involved and get them to provide all the exact same details from their own perspective.
I'm sorry, that surprises me, Aaron.
You'll see.
That surprises me. Go ahead. That's really surprising.
Oh my God. Down to the minute detail. And by the way, all of these reports are written reports, not just verbal reports, written reports. And then once all the reports are gathered, the key figures involved are going to be further interrogated using Scientology's e-meter. In Scientology, it's called a security check or a sec check, but it's an interrogation because they want to know who did what exactly. Now you might go, oh, because they're going to like really come down hard on the perpetrator. The thing is, in Scientology, there's this concept that we're all immortal spiritual beings called Thetans, and we are all completely responsible, not only for everything we do, but everything that's done to us. And Scientology has its own ethics and justice and discipline procedures, and they need to know all the details so they know how much discipline to dish out to each party. It's just that none of this ever includes involving law enforcement. So you might be surprised that they want all of these details because you're like, well, they're not going to report it to anybody. They want the details for their own use, right?
Because they're going to have their own type of enforcement, basically.
Yes. And so if you have Jane Doe 1 or Jen is like Scientology, she's going to be raked over the coals to isolate. Now, look, yes, he did this to you, but let's figure out what parts of this you were responsible for, because you're going to have to make amends for the parts you were responsible for.
My God.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And I don't mean responsible like how short was the skirt you were wearing? I mean, have you done something similar to someone else in a prior life? Maybe, it's wackadoodle. I mean,
are you kidding? That is so dangerous. Yeah. That is so dangerous. I cannot even. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
When you're in Scientology, this shit makes perfect sense. That's what's so scary. That's what's so scary.
Of course. I actually do understand that because I used to be in a religion. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. And so, in Scientology, almost no matter how bad what you've done is, there's sort of a standard series of procedures in place called the lower ethics conditions that you have to go through the steps of these conditions. They're called the conditions formulas. And the lower ethics conditions are like liability, enemy, treason, doubt, liability, and confusion. And usually you get put down into liability, and there's a step that you have to do to make up the damage and deliver an effective blow to the enemies of the group and all this kind of stuff. And that's where you can get amends projects and people donating money to make up the amends and make up the damage. There's all sorts of steps. Basically, the worst thing that you did, the longer it will take you to come out of your lower conditions, but everyone's doing the same lower conditions. Okay. So Jane Doe 1 at this point might have been assigned lower conditions to address the parts of it she was responsible for. And then Danny would be doing lower conditions for the parts he's responsible for. Because there's no such thing as a victim in Scientology. A victim is actually a slanderous, a derogatory word in Scientology. Being a victim is actually, it's one of the ways Scientology has redefined words. Being a victim is a slur in Scientology.
Oh my God.
Yes. You can always have to approach everything how you can take responsibility for it and how you can be at cause over it. And so,
I'm sorry, Aaron, but if no one is a victim, then no one is a perpetrator. That lets perpetrators off the hook. there's no real accountability for them. You know, if we're all equally being punished, then no one's really the perpetrator here.
I would agree with you, but in Scientology, they have this weird thing where like everybody is pretty much a perpetrator at all times. Meaning, like in Scientology, like everyone is always being accused of being a bad guy. So
Got it.
it's okay to accuse someone of being a bad guy, but being a victim is what you must never be.
Okay, got it.
That might sound weird, but I mean, so honestly, there's a principle in Scientology that says if you feel misemotional, which means upset, grief. So let's say something happened to you. You're like, okay, that happened to me. I'm over and I'm going to move on. That's not showing misemotion. Misemotion would be, oh no, I'm so sad. I don't know how to move on. I can't get past this. Like someone needs to make this better. The principle in Scientology is if there's something that happened to you that you are misemotional about, you're still sad, you're still crying, you're still angry. It means you haven't taken responsibility for that thing. And only once you take full responsibility for that thing will your negative emotions about that thing go away. And so if you're a victim of SA, you know, of assault, and you're still upset about it, it's because you haven't taken responsibility for your role in it. And not, I don't mean in a punitive way. I mean, like in a spirit, you know, Scientology would say in the auditing, in the spiritual counseling sense, like we're going to have to keep auditing you on this subject until you've actually really come to terms with how you were responsible. And if that means it's because you committed genocide on a race in a planet in another solar system 1 billion years ago, well, then that's what it means. It's whatever you come up with in your auditing sessions. So maybe you raped an entire civilization 1 trillion years ago in another galaxy. Like this, just imagine the psychic damage this does to people, having to search into these, what I could now call imaginary past lives, to find the things that they've done that predisposed them to being victims of those things now in present time.
My goodness.
Literally everything is your fault.
My
so
goodness.
if I hit you, I'm responsible for that, but so are you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's also very convenient for the organization, because if I'm a Scientologist and I'm upset with the organization, then the organization's representative comes to me and says, it sounds like you haven't really taken full responsibility for this. I think we're going to have to address that. The beatings will continue until morale improves.
Oh my goodness. So
that was a joke.
I got the reference. I wonder what type of, this is outside my wheelhouse. I'm a legal professional and a medical professional or a mental health professional. What type of damage does that do to one's psyche to be forced to work through your abuse as though you are partly responsible for it? And what damage must that have done to the Jane Does in this case? You know, that's a question I have in my mind.
Exactly. And it's hard to put words to what that damage is, because it's going to be different for each person. But considering what we've just discussed, it also explains why a Scientologist, even if they were technically allowed to report something to the police, based on this belief system, they wouldn't, because that's being a victim.
Right.
What you're asking someone to come in and punish this guy, it sounds like you just think you're a victim. Like, take responsibility for it. What did you do that contributed to this? And it's, I got to tell you, when I left Scientology, it took me a while to come to terms, to grasp what even the concept of civil rights was all about, or having rights at all. Right. I very much was conditioned to believe, like if someone's investigating you or wants to search your stuff, if you have nothing to hide, what do you have to object to?
What are you objecting to?
If you have nothing to hide, what's the problem? Because that's what's drilled into you in Scientology. And
that's, legally speaking, that's literally why this country was formed, right, was to avoid those types of searches and intrusion on privacy, because that used to be the standard. If you've got nothing to hide, why not let the police come run through your house and question you? And you've got nothing to hide. And we put in a constitution for that very reason. People need an outlet, privacy, whatever the case may be. And it just seems like they didn't have any of that here.
That's right. I think you're going to appreciate this more than most, because being an actual defense attorney, I remember being fresh out of the Sea Org, still in Scientology, but fresh out of the Sea Org, watching cable news for the first time. And I'm seeing stories play out where you have, attorneys, they get up, they do a press conference, and they're demanding that this person's civil rights were violated. And I remember thinking to myself, why is it that the guy's a criminal? I remember going, why is it that they're always having this argument about someone who's actually a criminal? How come it's never someone who's actually innocent? I don't understand what's happening here. It took me a while to understand that even people suspected of committing crimes, or even people convicted in the past of committing crimes, still have rights. And there's a reason why those rights have to be upheld, even for everyone, not just for a select group. Because in Scientology, I was trained to think, no, only honest people have rights. That's a direct quote from L. Ron Hubbard. Rights are for honest people.
Well, who determines who's honest and who's not? What the heck? That's why we give rights to everybody, because who the hell determines who's good and who's bad, who's honest and who's not? Get out of here.
It took me a long time to understand that, the people in power aren't always the good guys, because that's how we think in Scientology. You can never question command. Command is basically a benevolent monarchy, essentially. And it took me a while to understand that just because you're in power doesn't mean you're good or right.
Right.
It took me years to understand that that's not how things work.
So throughout the conduct or the time of the trial, hold on, let me ask you. No, before I ask you, let me do this YouTube thing that you should usually do around here. So guys, let me let you know, we've got 5,784 people here between my stream and Aaron's stream. Thank you so much for joining us. A lot of you here are subscribers to Growing Up in Scientology. Please consider checking me out as well. I have a lot of different topics that I cover here. And I'm an experienced criminal defense attorney. So, that helps, because I kind of sort of know what I'm talking about just a little bit, right? If you are currently watching the stream, please like the stream. If you don't feel compelled to subscribe, that's fine. But please feel compelled to like the stream, because that will help the stream to reach throughout the algorithm. And for the lawyer chicklets, right now, there are 2,200 of you. Thank you so much. You guys are amazing. Please make sure that you like the stream as well. So this is my question to you, Aaron. It's apparent to me, in my personal opinion, based on what I've seen in the media and what I've seen here on YouTube and things that I've watched, that the Church of Scientology is pretty staunchly on the side of Danny Masterson. Like, they have the ability, if they wanted to excommunicate him, dub him a suppressive person, and completely leave the courtroom and not have anything else to do with him. But that's not what they've chosen. They've chosen this. They're going to stick beside him. So they've stuck beside him, right? Why is it, in your opinion, as a former Scientologist, from your childhood, that they chose Danny Masterson over the victims? Like, why did they choose to stick with him? Like, they could have even been neutral. They could have decided, we're not going to intervene at all. They've gone to law enforcement now. Our hands are off. We have nothing to do with it. But they are staunchly, it appears, on the side of Danny Masterson. Why do you think that is?
It's because the victims turned on Scientology as well. Yes, even Jane Doe 1's mother, who's still a Scientologist, was willing to cooperate with the prosecution as long as Scientology didn't get dragged into the trial. And as soon as Scientology got dragged in, she refused to participate. And they couldn't put her on the stand because she was going to get up there and lie. And that's why the jurors, even though some of the Scientology reports were admitted into evidence, their jurors were not permitted to use those reports in their deliberations, actually, because the mother was never able to be put on the stand to verify that she had written those reports and that they were correct and accurate.
And so, as in reports, you mean reports that the victim made to Scientology?
Not just that, the reports that remember I said that these interrogations that they look at after every interrogation, and it's called an auditing session or a sec check, the auditor who conducted the sec check has to write up their own report about everything that was said.
Sure.
Jane Doe had a copy of one of the reports from one of Danny's sec check sessions. So, and based on that report, Jane Doe 1's mother wrote a letter directly to David Miscavige saying, this is not being handled correctly. Danny is being allowed to get away with this shit. And these are legitimate, bona fide internal Scientology reports that were written at the time. By the way, at a time before Leah Remini ever even left Scientology. The defense
Mhm.
team would have you believe that Leah Remini orchestrated all of this.
Right.
This all occurred, and these women came forward before Leah even left Scientology. Leah has nothing to do with anything other
Right.
than at this point advocating for the Jane.
Advocacy.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
And I forget the original question that you just asked me.
Oh, the original question was, why did they choose Danny Masterson? And you said it's because he stayed with the church.
That's right, because he stayed
Yeah.
with the church. And you go, well, why don't they kick him out as well?
Yeah.
Because they'd lose the whole family. Because Danny Masterson could, I mean, maybe this ship has sailed. He could have become another Leah Remini. Every one of the masters, every one of those Masterson, and there's like 16,000 members of the Masterson family. It's a huge family.
Yes.
They could all tell tales as bad as or much worse than the tales Leah Remini has told. And they're just trying to keep as many people on sides as possible. And the truth, Danny could turn, because Danny could cooperate with the obstruction of justice there's a grand jury investigation into obstruction of justice still ongoing.
Okay. I didn't know that. I just knew about the civil suit. I didn't know there was an investigation. Okay.
He could turn and cooperate. He could write his own book. I grew up in Scientology. Why I was taught to believe that everything I was doing was okay. You know, Scientology is just trying. I mean, they're kind of damned if they do, damned if they don't. You know, look how much PR damage they're taking by keeping a convicted serial rapist amongst their ranks.
Right.
No matter what they do here, and that's kind of the story of Scientology. I guess that's the that fallout of running a destructive human trafficking cult is you're sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't.
I like how you so casually say things like that. And it always cracks me up, and it's fun to see it in real time. A destructive human trafficking cult. I mean, I was just raised in a cult. What do I know? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, there's no good hand to play there.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So I guess my other question has to do with, does Scientology see the error of keeping documentation of suppressing reports of crimes? Because it's you know what I was like does no one else, like they have attorneys on staff, so I don't understand. Like they're like, yeah, so here's an alleged rape over here, an alleged rape over there, let's talk to the rapist and get his statement. And then when you said the reason I blew up with surprise when you said, no, they do a shadow investigation where they have their own shadow law enforcement who does an investigation, and their own shadow interrogation and shadow prosecution, and they send both sides to go do whatever their penitence is, however you want to call it. I'm like, that's liability, because you can't, there's no plausible deniability here. You can't say, we had no idea, we don't know what. You're involving yourself in an investigation, keeping them from going to the proper authorities, and you're making documentation of assaults that are happening within your organization. I know that's not really a question per se, but please take it away if you understand what I'm saying.
You would think so, but it's policy. I mean, look, in the 70s, you must stop me if you've heard this before. So there's something called Operation Snow White. Scientology conducted the largest ever infiltration of the United States federal government.
I did hear about this, but please tell us, please. Yes.
Okay. And finally, one person who was involved in it got caught making photocopies in like a library of the IRS, and he was arrested, and he got out on bail. And then Scientology kidnapped him and tried to keep him from turning himself in. But then his name was Michael Meisner, and he escaped, and he turned himself in, and he told the feds exactly where all of the internal Scientology files were located that had documentation of all of the crimes that was being committed. So then the FBI raided these offices. It was only through Scientology's own files that the government had enough evidence of all the shenanigans they were up to send 11 of the highest level Scientologists, including L. Ron Hubbard's own wife, to prison. Yes. And you go, did they have some secret undercover agents? No, they just took Scientology's own damn files. Ridiculous. So you'd think they would stop doing this, but it's just the way they know how to do it. Now there's one interesting story I'll tell here. So recently, in recent history, Scientology was about a 5-year period where Scientology was so hard up to keep the donations and the fundraising going that they engaged in some of the most egregious systemic bank fraud, wire fraud, credit card fraud, identity theft, hundreds of millions of dollars of financial crimes. Okay. Once the scope, and not everyone at all layers of management truly knew the entire scope of what was happening.
Right.
But once someone got a whiff of it, they started investigating internally. Mm-hmm. At one point, the evidence became so egregious that Miscavige issued an order. Stop writing down the contents of the sec check sessions. Stop writing reports summarizing what was discussed in the session. And he literally issued an order. Do not stop putting everything in writing. This could cause us to lose our tax exempt status. No more written evidence. So when and
did he put that in writing?
No.
Okay.
And you go, well, how do you guys know that?
Yeah,
because
right.
People who were there at the time have since left and are talking, not publicly talking yet, but talking to the right people. Let's say that. Mm-hmm. And so in some ways they have learned their lesson, but here's actually even a more honestly disgusting answer for you. Sexually assaulting someone is barely considered a crime in Scientology. The only reason it's considered a crime is because society considers it a crime. I mean, it's like in Scientology, and you want to get even a little more disgusting, Scientology doesn't even consider that there is such a thing as a child. Scientology, because they said we're all immortal spiritual beings. So this is just a 42-year-old body. I'm not a 42-year-old spirit.
Right.
So, they look at a 5-year-old child and they go, well, 5 years ago, or 6 years ago, that could have been an 80-year-old man or woman. Like,
right.
A body's just a body. Who cares? So there's no protections in Scientology. There's no baked in protections for children. Scientologists don't believe in an evolving brain. That, you hear like the brain doesn't stop growing or evolving or maturing until like developing until like the early 20s.
Like 21, 22, something like that.
Scientology doesn't. They think that's made up science, right?
Oh wow.
And so you go, well, so when you're in an auditing session and you confess to having committed violence or violence of a sexual nature against anyone, it would never occur to someone to be like, oh, don't write that down. Unless a specific order came down that said, and to be perfectly honest, that might be an example of an order that would come down in the wake of this conviction is,
right.
Okay, guys, don't put the details anymore. Like, it's not our business.
Right.
It doesn't need to be in the files. You think, why was it ever your business?
Why would that? Yeah. Like, oh, thank you for telling us about this. Here's the local law enforcement. Here's some therapeutic sessions if you want to, even if you want to go, but here's the local law enforcement. Go tell them. Right.
Yeah.
This is such an exposure to liability. I'm so surprised that a lawsuit of this nature has not come sooner. Okay, what, if any, details have we received so far about any punishment, or I forgot the term you used, that Danny Masterson received from the Church of Scientology as a result of his behavior?
It's just the normal lower ethics conditions.
What does that mean?
So you're basically you're basically considered, you're in trouble. Like me saying, how did I describe it before? So I actually did an earlier podcast today where I talked about this. So I keep thinking I've said it before, but I haven't. So L. Ron Hubbard says, this is a Scientology lesson.
Yeah.
We are not just existing, in a vacuum. We are always in some operating condition. You're either doing good or you're doing bad. You're never just doing nothing. You're never just having no impact on yourself or your environment. Okay. And Scientology, he said, these conditions, they're basically called operating conditions. And non-existence would be like right in the middle, where theoretically you're just not having any impact on anything. But he goes, you don't stay in non-existence. You either improve or you get worse. And so non-existence, above non-existence, you would have danger, emergency, normal, affluence, and power. And in every one of these conditions has a formula. It has steps that you're supposed to actually proactively follow.
Sure.
And the conditions above non-existence is you're more or less having some sort of a positive impact on your environment.
Okay.
The conditions below non-existence, I believe it's is it liability, treason, enemy, doubt, confusion? I know I'm getting it in the wrong sequence. But when you're in trouble, the ethics officer or your senior basically says to you, you are assigned a condition of liability, and you have to follow the steps of that formula in order to come out of that condition and move up to the next higher condition. And you have to keep doing those steps until you're in a condition of normal.
Mm-hmm.
Now you might go, okay. And honestly, you can look up the conditions and the steps. It's too much to get into them. But the steps basically, particularly for the liability condition, amount to making amends. So you could summarize Scientology's entire ethics and justice system in 2 steps. Getting sec checks, the interrogations, and spilling your guts for every bad thing, deed, thought you ever had about Scientology, Scientologists, L. Ron Hubbard, David Miscavige, all this stuff. Just dozens.
I'm sorry. How are you thinking about L. Ron Hubbard? That man's been dead forever. Anyway, go ahead.
But I mean, dozens and dozens and dozens of hours of these interrogations, which, by the way, they're not free. You're usually paying $100 to $200 an hour for these interrogations. Okay. So dozens, if not hundreds of hours of sec checking, security checking, interrogations, and the amends procedure. The amends, you could do 500 hours of amends. You could do 1,000 hours of amends. A lot of amends includes donating money, of course, right? As a part of my amends, I'm going to donate money to this Scientology project, that Scientology project. Maybe I'm going to donate money to the person I harmed so they can get more Scientology auditing. So really, there's no official accountability other than the ethics officer saying, I think you've done enough. Now, here's where it gets interesting. On the condition of liability, in order to come out of the condition of liability, you have to actually write down on a piece of paper. Now, this goes to, are they really going to document everything? Yeah. You have to write down on a piece of paper what you've done, the realizations that you've had while, reflecting and going through this process. You have to list out everything you've done to make amends. And I shit you not, you have to take this paper and walk it around to as many Scientologists as you can, ask them, and at the end of it, it says, I request permission to rejoin the group. And you ask them, can you read my liability formula? And they read it, and they read the whole thing. And there's a column for yes and no. And they go, I think you've done a great job making up the damage and delivering an effective blow. I'm accepting you back into the group. So you're supposed to get over 50% of the members of the group to accept you to rejoin the group. It's up to the ethics officer to determine what the group is. So for Danny, the group might have been his family members. The group might have been the people at the celebrity center. The thing that's interesting about Danny is the group would have to be small because they don't want people to know what Danny did.
I was about to say, I was just about to say, okay, so we're spreading the liability here. We're opening up a bunch of other people to being involved in this cover up of SA. No, you're going to keep it in a small circle of people that are friendly to him so that he stays in the group. Okay.
That's right. And the ethics officer would make sure that what was written in the condition formula itself didn't include details that were so salacious that it would, but this is what it means. If you're in trouble in Scientology, well, how do you get out of trouble? You do enough amends, you donate enough money, and you ask the members of the group, will you let me back into the group of ethical Scientologists who are helping to clear the planet? And when they say yes, you turn all your signatures into the ethics officer, and he goes, good, you're officially out of lower conditions. And boom, you're a happy little Scientologist again.
So lower conditions to get out of there, you got to spill your guts, get interrogated. You got to say you're sorry. You got to cough up some cash. You got to make a list of all your bad boy or bad girl deeds. And then you've got to get your friends and family or whomever to sign off on it, saying that you're okay to come back.
That's right. I've never actually explained that before in a podcast.
Well, thank you. Well, that's the lawyer in me. You ain't gonna just say lower conditions, and I don't know what that means. Oh my goodness. Okay, so we know that it's possible Danny Masterson, just like his victims, went through lower conditions, right?
Yes.
And which is so sad that they both received the same punishment, that the victims receive any punishment, but that it's an equal level of punishment basically for the both of them, and they don't take SA or sexual assault very seriously. Okay, so we go through that. Do you think, and this is a theory, a hypothesis I've been working with, that some of the lack of community accountability within his community, outside of just the science, well, maybe including Scientology, but his friends that are maybe even Scientology adjacent, do you think some of that may be coming from Well, he made amends back in the early 2000s. He worked the system and the program back in the early 2000s. Now he's a happily married man with a child. He's productive. He's got a job. They said even when he lost his job, he got another job. He bought a house out in some other state, and he, was still a hardworking guy who's a solid family man, right? And this was just the early 2000s. I kind of feel like there's something in it there that like so much time has elapsed and he's been contrite, which I think is anti-factual, but whatever, within their rubric, that maybe that kind of bolsters the support that he has from the structure of the church.
You're totally correct.
Super leading question, but
they believe he's already done the Scientology procedures that he needed to do in order to make it right, and that's the end of it. Realize that the 7 or 8 women who have come forward, Scientology only ever knew about 2 of those, Jane Doe 1 and Jane Doe 3. So all these other people, Scientology doesn't know one way or the other, because it's not like Danny was confessing to this stuff in his own auditing sessions. He's assaulted multiple women in multiple states and multiple countries. But you are correct. That's one of the ways Scientology would justify it is, what are you talking about? Well, first of all, Scientology wouldn't even want people to know that he did what he did to Jane Doe 1 back in 2001.
Right.
But yeah, they would say, what do you mean? He did his lower conditions. He got his sec check. And by all reports, he hasn't raped anybody since he met Bijou. So by golly, he's made ethics change. Ethics change is a key word in Scientology. You either make ethics change or you don't. And if you do, that's all they care about. Have you changed? Are you better? Good. Then what's done in the past is
doesn't matter what you did before. Yeah.
Unless you leave Scientology and then they'll attack you with it and use it against you.
Yeah, right. Well, I was wondering about those auditing sessions. Is some of the research I've done and the documentaries I've seen and things like that. That basically you're just giving them a compromise, like this bad material on yourself. That if you leave, they can hold it over your head. Like Danny Masterson's never leaving Scientology because they've got too much over his head, I think.
And as much as I would love for him to leave Scientology and turn on them, I'll tell you, one of the reasons he definitely would never have done that before this conviction, Scientology could have just said to the prosecutors, oh, we've got a special little package here that will help you bury him for life. And yeah, so again, these people in this organization are bound by the most heinous acts. They are bound to each other by the most heinous acts.
Inextricably linked.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess the next section I wanted to go to were the sentencing letters by the various celebrities.
Yeah.
And I do want to say, kind of as a disclaimer, that I'm a defense attorney. I'm not against people writing character letters for people when they're facing sentencing. I am pro that. I am also pro being very careful about how you fashion those letters to is not re-victimize the victims, to not prejudice your client before the court when the court is going to put in, impose the sentence. So those are some kind of issues that I had with a lot of the letters that I read. But there was I read most of them, and there was a theme I saw arising through them. Number one was drugs. Almost every single letter found it necessary to touch on Danny Masterson doesn't do drugs. He keeps me away from drugs. I'm not involved in drugs because of Danny Masterson. The man is, what do they call him? Straight edge, right? Those people that don't do drugs.
But it's weird because he's a heavy drinker and they don't seem to count that.
Right. I don't understand. Okay. That's number one. And I want to address that. Number two, the second theme I saw arising was, I trust Danny, right? I trust him. Either they invoke him as a father. I would trust him with my children. I trust him as a father. That type of thing. And the trust is okay. But the whole, like, I would leave my children alone with him, that Ashton Kutcher said, that concern, I don't know if you saw what I said in my video, that actually bothered me because, when it's unnecessary to say, he's a guy who was like a brother to me. Fine. We grew up in Hollywood together and he's always been totally forthcoming with me. Fine. He's a hard worker. Fine. He's loving. Every time I've seen him, he's been loving. That's completely normal because that's how it could be. Someone could be a predator, but then with their family members or their loved ones who they don't prey upon, they could be perfect people to them. So all that's fine. But then to just throw in there, I would leave him alone with my daughter. daughters that concern me. So I want to talk about those two things, but mainly the drugs. Some people in the comment section have suggested that that could have possibly been a Scientology talking point. And I was concerned about it because the Jane Does had alleged that he put drugs in their alcohol in order to incapacitate them so that he could assault them. And so the reason I said I didn't like them putting that in there was because it's kind of contrary to what the witnesses testified to, and it invokes it in the mind of the judge about the drugging, and so I just wouldn't take that risk. So that's what I was saying. So I was wondering if you had any kind of thoughts on why so many people found it necessary to talk about the drugs or not using drugs, even though it's documented that he's had an issue with alcohol. Why that would be brought in there, if that could be a Scientology thing, or if you think it has no relation, in your honest opinion.
Scientology has a few different social betterment groups, front groups that it's created purely for the benefit of, it thinks it generates goodwill with society. Okay. Mm-hmm. And that's the drug-free initiatives and the human rights initiatives. So they have like the Youth for Human Rights International is the Scientology front group. The drug-free marshals was a Scientology front group. I forget what the name of their current drug-free group is. Okay. But like one of the ways Scientology gets into public schools is they have people without acknowledging it's a Scientology program go in and do drug-free lectures and hand out drug-free booklets. Sure. L. Ron Hubbard or someone else along the way conducted some survey and decided that in order for Scientology to be considered acceptable to society, they have to see us as being strong against drugs and strongly in favor of human rights. Mm-hmm. I think it's almost at this point sort of a stereotype or a cliche that Scientologists, when you get them in front of a camera, they're going to talk about anti-drug and pro-human rights. Mm-hmm. So I can't think really of any other reason because it does come across as if mentioning that in those letters is calling bullshit on the Jane Doe's testimony.
Yes. Even if that's not what the writers are thinking as they're I'm writing, but typing, right? As they're typing, even if that's not what they're thinking, it could potentially evoke that in the mind of the judge, who's the most important person. But also, they're not writing it for the public, but the public has seen it. The victims have seen it. And the victims have the right to be present in court. They have the right to know what's in those letters and all that stuff that's impacting the sentencing. So you're sending the message to the victims who have the right to be there and the right to hear everything, that kind of covertly, how could you have been drugged if this man has been against drugs? That's kind of the danger I saw in that,
That's right. And also, it also looks dishonest when 50 letters are all saying the same thing. It looks like a coordinated letter writing campaign, which, by the way, is something Scientology's famous for.
Tell us more, Aaron. Preach on it. Come on, tell us some more.
Oh my God, letter writing campaigns is what they had us children do in the org. I mean, like letter writing campaigns, Scientology staff members and SEERG members, Scientology can mobilize thousands of people to write letters, and the letters will all sound the same because they're all told, hit on these points. Right. And it's just, if you're Danny's friend and you're just told in a vacuum, well, not in a vacuum, but in the context of the trial, please send a letter to the judge begging for leniency, you're not mentioning that Danny doesn't like drugs.
Thank you. It's weird. It was weird. And it's just, as someone who, this is my life. Right. So obviously I try to keep my clients from getting convicted, but that's not possible in every single case. And so if your client gets convicted, what's your job? Do your best to get them the lightest sentence possible, because we're advocates. That's what defense attorneys are supposed to do. And by George, I have never seen such a consistent theme for the same. I've had it where my client has 5 or 6 family members write a letter. They all might say something similar, but they're going to be different in the words of the same of the person. They're going to have a different tone to them. They're going to talk about their unique experience, and they wouldn't cross over like how these letters did with this whole drug thing. It was very strange to me, and I don't know anything for certain. Don't sue me, okay? I'm just saying that made my spidey senses tingle. It was strange to me.
Well, totally. And then you look, because the letters I've paid the most attention to so far is, of course, the ones from Ashton and Mila. It's not like they just said, he's always been great with me.
Yeah.
It said, he's always been great with everyone. And you go, nobody fucking speaks like that.
No. How about this? We were in a bodega and he saw a guy disrespecting his girlfriend and he intervened. And how much of that only Scientology can fix something. We have to intervene in things, kind of is involved. But also when you're talking about the facts of the case, so are you saying, and again, not criticizing the letter writing itself, I'm just criticizing the content of it, right? Are you saying, or could someone say that you're saying, how could he have assaulted these women if he rescues women in bad situations?
That is exactly how that letter read, which honestly is why he's taking so much crap. If it just said, look, I know Danny, it didn't even say we accept the sentence. It says we recognize that this has been found and, adjudicated this way. It didn't even say we accept it, we believe it. But there's a good side to Danny. The letter sort of the letter refused to acknowledge the truth of what he'd been convicted of.
They don't even address the victims. They don't say, even though we both founded this human trafficking organization, which I know Ashton founded it and then Mila came along later, I think. We both work in this human trafficking organization, and we want to protect children. And so our hearts go out to the victims. However, this is the Danny Masterson that I know. That would have been an amazing letter, right? Yeah. And as a defense attorney in mitigation, if my client's been convicted, it's a hard tightrope that you have to walk, especially when you know that you're going to file an appeal on behalf of your client and he's still maintaining his innocence, and that's his right to do that, right? But at least the other people can say, our hearts go out to the victims, we love Danny, and this is what we have to say about him. That would have been a much softer tone that I think there would have still been outrage. Let's not lie. There would have still been outrage, but I think would have been more appropriate and more appropriate for an advocate to submit on behalf of their client.
Yeah. And here's what many people may not even be aware of. These women are not strangers to Ashton. Right. These women are not strangers to Mila.
Can you explain that a bit? Yes, I watched your video on that. Thank you for sharing that and bringing that back up. If you could give us some more information on that.
Jane Doe 1 wasn't as close in Danny's circle of friends as some of the other people like Luke Watson, who I've mentioned in my videos, because she was more closer with Lisa Marie Presley. Lisa Marie Presley had her circle of friends. Danny had his circle of friends. There wasn't a ton of overlap there. And Jane Doe 1 was in Lisa Marie Presley's circle of friends. But they all knew each other. Jane Doe 1 is in an episode of Punk'd. Ashton knew Jane Doe 1 by not her name, but her nickname. Like, he knows who she is, that she's a Scientologist, that she's a normal, decent, good person, not some vengeful, spiteful, whatever, and that she came forward when she was still a Scientologist. Mm-hmm. Jane Doe 3, Chrissy Bixler, was with Danny for like 6 years. Mm-hmm. Ashton knows her very well.
Because him and Ashton and Danny are like brothers.
And that's why what you've seen come out recently is that Jane Doe 3, Chrissy, was sitting next to Danny while Danny had Ashton on speakerphone after Ashton came out of Ashley Ellerin's house, having just discovered her lying on the floor, dead, murdered. While he then told police he never was in there, and instead of calling the police, he went to the Emmys party that they were supposed to go to together.
Okay. Whoa. You just did a lot. Okay. We're going. No, I don't want you to not go there. I want you to go there. I just want to, because I try. Okay. First of all, I want to say a couple things. Ashton Kutcher is not confirmed to be a Scientologist. Is that correct?
He's never been a Scientologist.
Never been a Scientologist. Mila Kunis is not a Scientologist.
Not a Scientologist.
But Ashton and Mila have been friends since that 70s show, which premiered in 98, right? So they've been friends since 98, 25 years of friendship, right? Mm-hmm. And have run in Scientology circles. And from your video, a Scientologist was like an assistant for Ashton Kutcher, like at the time
Oh,
that.
you have been
Yeah,
watching.
no, I'm not playing. Like I actually watch your videos.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, his personal assistant was a Scientologist, and that could only happen with the approval of the president's office of the Celebrity Center. Ashton visited the Celebrity Center and their galas many times. Wilmer Valderrama did many times. In fact, every year the Celebrity Center puts on a Christmas show to raise money for the LAPD. All of the cast members of that 70s show, or the young cast members, not the parents,
Not the parents, yeah.
would go to that show. All these, except for Topher Grace, all these people were very much embedded in the Scientology community, even though only Laura Prepon became a Scientologist. Ashton did not, Wilmer did not, Mila did not, and I feel like I'm probably missing somebody. But yeah, so not a Scientologist, but as embedded as you could be without becoming one.
I wonder why he's not one. But anyway,
I think it might have had to do with his actual spiritual beliefs.
I know when he was married to Demi Moore, wasn't he into like Kabbalah or something like that? I'm sure he's not anymore, but
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Why do I know that? Okay.
And Demi was not a fan of Scientology.
Well, good for her. Go G.I. Jane. Okay, so I tried to preview that a bit. I tried to talk about that in my last stream, and it kind of went a little left. But
I saw that.
That's
actually what made me message you.
Yeah. I do want to talk about it though, because this intertwining with Scientology, it's like a cancer almost that's gone back such a long time and has impacted so much of this case downright. I think it might have even impacted these sentencing letters. And with Scientology having all this information on people and using it to its advantage, maybe potentially, allegedly, can we talk about the party that Ashton Kutcher was supposed to go to with his then date female friend? I wouldn't really say girlfriend because they've been dating for a little period of time. But can you give us the lowdown on that? I know that people that are subscribed to you have already seen that video, but I went to the article and the court case that would his testimony is like on YouTube and stuff like that. I went to the article, so it's not as though this didn't happen. But I'd like to kind of parse out what's been confirmed through media sources or testified to versus what is like things that from other sources. Do you know what I mean?
Nothing has been confirmed by media sources as far as the stuff that I'm talking about, because the media has never gotten into this.
Okay.
But, I have from sources at the LAPD, sources, former Scientologists who were close to Ashton and people who were close to Danny, that the LAPD had to keep calling Ashton in for questioning, right? Because obviously, right, he contacted the police and basically out of concern and said, "Oh my God, my fingerprints, my DNA are going to be there, but my fingerprints going to be on the doorknob. I was in the house the night before and all this stuff." And so they're like, "Okay, come on in." And they question him. And then he would give these false stories about where he was, when he was. And, the LAPD even had the history of his phone pinging off different towers, and were able to verify that he was lying about his story of the timeline and where he was and where he wasn't and what he saw and where he saw.
How do you know? You don't have to tell me names or anything, but how do you know that? How do you know
LAPD who are working on the case?
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they had to keep bringing him in to be like, are you sure about this part of your story? And he would have to keep admitting, okay, you're right. It was really this. It was really that. And they're like, okay, so now look, I'm confident of the things that I'm saying. There's certain leaps that I have to be careful about not making.
Okay, don't make the leaps.
Well, I'll describe the leap.
Okay.
Were there factors other than the reason? In addition, was there other factors in addition to the reasonable doubt that was created by someone literally being present on the murder scene and lying about it and lying about the details? Was there additional items of reasonable doubt that prevented them from prosecuting Michael Gargiulo at that time? Right. I don't know. I've only heard the details about the reasonable doubt that Ashton created.
Right.
If there's additional items of reasonable doubt, I'm not aware of them.
Okay. I got you.
Okay. And so that's the leap that I cannot make.
Okay.
So does the fact that they were not able to even bring charges against this guy lie solely on Ashton's shoulders, or are there other items as well? I'd love to know.
Okay.
But it sure
don't
didn't help that you had a guy lying about having been at the murder scene and
Right.
seen the body and didn't call the police. That's, I mean, come on. You tell me, would a public defender make mincemeat out of a prosecution?
Absolutely.
I mean, come on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're the alternative suspect for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, they charge my client the before he becomes a serial killer. They charge him, and we're on trial. Ashton Kutcher is my alternative suspect, and he didn't do it, guys. He didn't do it. He did not kill this woman.
He did not. Here's
he
the
did not.
Here's the pushback that I've been getting. They successfully prosecuted the guy, I don't know, was it 10, 15, 20 years later?
Right.
For the murder of Ashley Ellering and other people. So the pushback that I've been getting is, wait. If they prosecuted him for that 20 years later, then you must have your facts wrong about why they didn't prosecute him earlier.
No, that's not a logical leap at all. Go ahead. That criticism doesn't make any sense. I'll explain why, but go ahead.
Well, in other words, they were able to say 20 years later, they were somehow able to overcome whatever reasonable doubt Ashton Kutcher would have presented. And I go, what are you talking about? They didn't even bring up that reasonable doubt at the later prosecution. No. They let Ashton take the stand and testify to the bullshit story that they knew was bullshit 20 years earlier.
Mm-hmm. The reason that they're able to prosecute him with more assurance that they'll be likely to obtain a conviction after he's killed 2 more people and attempted to kill another. Wasn't that it? He killed
I might have misstated. He killed 1 more person and attempted to
kill another. Right. Okay. So he killed 1 more woman, attempted to kill another, is because they can show a pattern of him trying to kill women. So the more people you kill, the more likely it is that you're going to be convicted for killing all of those people. You kill 1 person, you're more likely to get away with it than if you kill 3, 4, 5 people. You start building up a pattern, a way of committing the crime, and they can use those previous crimes to show that you're like a serial killer or something like that, and that you must have killed those previous people because of how you killed these people now. So that doesn't, make any sense. The only thing that does give me pause is that if they had such doubts about his story, they allowed him to get on the stand and give the same exact story, and why the defense counsel didn't cross-examine him about contaminating the crime scene or seeing the body and not calling the police and going to the party instead. See what I'm saying?
And I have that same question.
Yeah.
And I go, is it possible that when they were dealing, I don't know, when they're prosecuting a guy who so obviously did, take Ashley out of the equation, so obviously did the other things he's on trial for, did they really want to be like, but he didn't do this one? Like, I just don't know. I don't know how lawyers approach these things.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. It's a good question, but you have sources. Someone who spoke to him that night. Is that right? Do you know someone who spoke, or
Danny?
Yeah.
Ashton called Danny. Jane Doe 3 was sitting right next to him when Danny's on the speakerphone with Ashton talking about the plan. The plan is don't call the police, go to the party, let someone else discover the body. Then when it gets reported in the papers, then you call in and say, oh no, my fingerprints are there. I'm so worried. And that's what Jane Doe 3 is referring to.
So Jane Doe 3 has said this?
Yes, she put it on Instagram a couple days ago and it went crazy.
Oh, well.
She alluded to the date. She goes, Ashton, did you forget that I was there the whole time? Did you forget that I was sitting there next to Danny on the night of February 21st, 2001? I might have the date wrong, but it was whatever it was. Yeah. She put that on Instagram and it went, but here's the thing. One of the reasons it went crazy is because some people misunderstood that she was accusing him of the murder. That's not what she was accusing him.
No. I've seen since, so just recently I started to see people saying Ashton Kutcher could be and he's not. It's very clear the other guy did it, right? Like that's very, very clear.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I wanted to hash that out. I wanted to understand kind of, where the sources were coming from. If Jane Doe 3 is saying, hey, remember that date when that girl was found deceased, and then you went to the party, that gives it a bit more, I think, credibility to that story. So now you wonder, why did Ashton write that letter? That's what I want to tie this all into, right? The name of this video is the links between the Danny Masterson's case and the Church of Scientology. How do we get to these very strange, these very strange letters? To me, just strange, some of the subject matter that they touch on, other parts, just fine. when you have a guy who's not in the Church of Scientology that's writing the letter, and his wife, and some people that are in the Church of Scientology, and then you have Danny Masterson, who's in the Church of Scientology, going to prison for 30 to life. How do we get there? How do we bring this all full circle?
Well, I think at this point, it's almost impossible to make a distinction between Danny Masterson himself, his criminal defense team, his civil defense team, and the Church of Scientology itself. Mm-hmm. So Danny and his family, Danny and Carol and the family, the two defense teams, and Scientology itself. So when that request comes in from Sean, well, actually, Ashton said it came in from the family. Mm-hmm. So when that request comes in to write a letter, I do personally believe, my opinion, that part of what's going through Ashton's mind is they've got a lot of shit on me. So the least I can do is write this letter. And I do believe they were assured, improperly so by the defense attorneys, that those letters would never see the light of day. And so he didn't mind laying it on really, really thick. Like inappropriately thick, because what's the harm? Danny's already going to prison. I can at least put on a good show, keep Carol happy with me, and what's the harm?
Well, I wouldn't, I wouldn't think that. First of all, I think your speculation as to his mindset makes a lot of sense, but I wouldn't think that his attorneys, his mindset, Kutcher, Masterson's attorneys would even necessarily assure them of that. I just think that they would assume that the lay people, non-attorneys, all of them, celebrities, whoever, they would assume, oh, I'm writing a letter to the judge, right? Because attorneys know how to carefully word things. Would you please write a letter to the judge about Danny Masterson, character letters, telling him her what a great guy he is, and just not say these will become a part of the public record and they will eventually be released. And I'll tell you this. My number one concern is my client. So I'm not thinking about PR for the character witnesses or fact witnesses in my case. So that doesn't necessarily mean the attorneys are being sneaky. It just means that they're not thinking to say, oh, by the way, think about your PR. They're going to be like, can you give me some letters? I'm going to give them to the judge. And if you don't ask them directly, are these going to be public? They're probably not going to think to tell you that they are, because they've got bigger fish to fry than whether or not Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis's letters leak. That's kind of how I more see it. But I could be wrong. Like, that's just how I see it, though.
That makes perfect sense. Were you following the Tory Lanez stuff? I mean, I wasn't, but
I was following it. Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Was there not some big kerfluffle when the letters became public?
That's absolutely.
If you follow the dates, the letters were written in July. Mm-hmm. If you look at the dates specifically, those letters were written before a whole bunch of celebrities realized that their Tory Lanez letters were made public without their awareness that this was going to happen.
Yeah.
When I heard that happen in the Tory Lanez case, I said, "Oh my God, I hope a whole bunch of people submitted letters in the Danny Masterson stuff, not realizing it." You'd think that Mila and Ashton, maybe they're not paying attention to the Tory Lanez stuff, would have been like, "Oh shit, get our letters back."
Right.
It looks like one person did that. So there's the defense motion.
Someone who wrote their letter found out that the letters become public and asked for it back, maybe?
Let me tell you why I think this occurred and who it was.
Okay.
The defense motion, what do you call it? The sentencing memorandum position statement. What do you call it?
Sentencing memorandum. Yeah. Memorandum in aid of sentencing. It has a different name for every like jurisdiction and state, but that's what it is. Mm-hmm.
The motion itself has quoted excerpts from every letter that was attached. It didn't reduplicate the whole letter, just quoted.
Yeah. No, I would do that. When I'm doing a sentencing memo, if I've got letters from family, I would say, as mom said, blah, 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 but then that'll reference a longer letter. But yeah, go ahead.
In the motion, there is a quote from a letter that was submitted by actor Ethan Suplee.
I don't know who that is.
Oh, my name is Earl. He was the big fat guy. He was in American History X. He was the big fat guy.
Oh, yeah. Has he lost? He's lost weight, though, right?
He's lost a ton of weight.
Yeah. He looks great. Yeah.
His letter is not included in the package of letters. I believe that motion was written and Ethan said, throw my letter away or give it back to me. And they forgot to edit the motion itself.
That makes a lot of sense.
But why was no one else smart enough to do that?
Busy.
Maybe only Ethan was watching the Tory Lanez.
Yeah. Like Tory Lanez was one of those like kind of you had to be in the in crowd to really know that that was going on and everything like that. Like you're interested in hip hop maybe or something, but this was more widespread, I think.
Or
And so
as I
maybe
referred to him in one of my videos, Tory Lanez.
Lanez, did you call him that by accident?
I didn't know the right way.
You didn't know how to say his name? Oh, that is so adorable. I love it. I absolutely love that. And it's there's layers to why that's so funny, because this is just Natalie as a human being talking. He has a huge ego. And so I know someone calling him Lanez would probably drive him crazy because he thinks he's so famous. You can tell by like his letters and stuff and the way he talks about how he's being targeted by Rock Nation. He thinks he's so famous, you know? And so Lanez is just hilarious. I love that. Okay, so have we tied it all together, or did I interrupt you? Have we tied the letter to the possible letters to the possible links? Well, Giovanni Ribisi wrote a letter, and he is a member of the Church of Scientology, but to the possible link to the Church of Scientology or influence on that.
Here's my guess. I don't think anyone from the Church of Scientology asked people to write letters. That's just my guess. Because Carol Masterson herself is essentially, I mean, I'm contradicting myself. Carol Masterson herself is essentially the Church of Scientology. I mean, in the sense of this, she's been in for so long that Carol herself would understand that if she was going to ask people to do a letter writing campaign, she would provide a model, a sample letter, points to hit on. She would do what they would do in Scientology. So Carol's been around for so long. And so I don't think when Ashton says Danny's family contacted us, I totally believe that. I don't think someone from the Celebrity Center president's office contacted Ashton and Mila. I think Carol, who acts like a Scientologist in everything she does, she's an incredibly dedicated Scientologist. I've heard her described by some people as the most dedicated Scientologist I've ever known, like Tom Cruise, that she knows the right way to do a letter writing campaign. You don't just ask 50 people to write letters. You tell them what the hell you want to write. End of story, honestly. So, you know, the people who wrote those letters was a very eclectic mix of Scientologists and non-Scientologists and industry people. But here's what's interesting. The retired police people and New York firefighter people, those are all people who are working with Scientology. So Carol basically used her Scientology connections and her Scientology celebrity friends and a handful of just non-Scientology people that Danny knew. That's the Scientology connection when it comes to the letter writing. You know?
And they could have gotten an outline from her maybe, and that might explain the consistencies maybe across the board in the letters and the things that they reference to.
Absolutely.
Okay. I think we've come full circle. I do. I think we've landed the plane. That's where I kind of wanted to bring it to. What is the connection of Scientology that runs throughout this entire case? We discussed the initial assaults and reporting to the Church of Scientology, Scientology's own way of investigating and acting as some type of quasi judicial body, basically. It finally getting to law enforcement and the press, and then trial and sentencing. So thank you so much for going through all of that with us. That was 20 something years of history that we just went through. If we discussed the few times we talked about L. Ron Hubbard, 50 years of history, you know? So we really brought it home. Do you want to stick around for some of these super chats? I saw that some of the people had questions in there for you. Great.
Absolutely.
So let's do it. All right. You know what? I usually don't do these things when I have guests here, but it's just for fun. Okay, guys, we're going to be covering the super chats. Plug your ears.
That's a hell of an intro for the super chat.
Yeah, isn't that fun? Okay, so shout out goes to Valentina Nickel, who makes all of my screen transitions. Ophelia Wild, welcome to the Lawyer Chicklets. Car Ree, welcome to the Lawyer Chicklets. LawTube and SPTV intermingling, and I'm here for it. So am I. Thank you very much, Diana B. And SPTV is suppressive person television, right?
Yep.
Look, I'm in the know, okay? Weary became a YouTube member. Welcome to the Lawyer Chicklets. Allison has been a member for 2 months and says, Scientologist hijacks, beware. Scientologist hijacks, beware. Ooh. I mean, they can kick rocks, child. Anybody worried about them? Jill J says, thank you, Jill. Jordan and McKay and Ron collabs in 1 week. Just fantastic. Keep up the great work, both of you, and keep up the awesome collabs. Thank you so much. And it's because of all of you wonderful subscribers that these collabs are possible, because you talk to me and I listen, okay? You tell me who you want to see, and I do my best to get them out there. The next person I want to get out is, what are they calling her? Queen, the expert. Queen. They're calling her. Yeah?
Claire Headley?
Yeah, they're calling her Queen Claire in the chat, just so you know. So
I can put you in touch with Claire, no problem.
Please, thank you. I would love to interview her because I love a good expert witness testimony.
Yeah.
I nerd out for that. Parallel Jen, thank you for the super chat, says, my 2 YouTube world together. Love it. Look at that, Aaron. They love you in here. Stacy Y, thank you so much for the super chat. In heaven right now, SPTV geekette with a law nerd side. Been waiting for LawTube lawyers to be covering the Church of Scientology craziness. Love this. And I know that Emily D. Baker has touched on it a bit too. And I would call Emily D. Baker like the president of LawTube, but like but just like the most, like, she's, to me, it's just like the best of us. She's the best of like content creation of lawyers on here.
She was involved in a case where Scientology was actively involved in jury intimidation, jury tampering.
Oh,
and
wow.
I did a video about it. It's I've been dying for her to like revisit it, because I want to do a video about her video.
Right.
Yeah.
God, I would love to know about. Okay, I have to watch that video. Okay. Tampa B-Man, thank you for the super chat. In Scientology, justice possible without being declared as if. What does that mean?
Is Scientology justice?
Yeah. Without being declared as if. Lord Jesus. Liz Pantelis, thank you for the super chat. Worked for a company whose founder was a former Scientologist. Part of my job was fending off Church of Scientology's calling and trying to sell us stuff and get my boss back. Ooh. Aaron, did they try to get you back after you left?
Well, so it depends. Realize that. So in this case, her boss like was paying public and drifted away, and they were trying to get him back to pay more. When I say I officially left in 2014, that's when they officially like nutshell short version, right?
Sure.
My mom got kicked out for saying some smack about David Miscavige, and for 2 years, Scientology said I had to never see or talk to my mom again. So for 2 years, I just lied my ass off that I was not seeing her or talking to her, but really I was.
Good for you. Yeah. That takes a lot of courage, actually.
in many ways. So in March 2014 is when they were like, oh, he's just going to keep lying to us about this, isn't he? And they're like, yep. And they're like, okay, you're gone. So after that point, they wouldn't try to get me back because they officially kicked me out.
They kicked you out. Okay. Yeah. You were just doing your own thing. Like, you're not going to tell me not to talk to my mama. I don't know who they think they are telling people not to talk. I wish somebody would tell me not to talk to my mom. Crazy. Okay. So we have one here from Paracord Princess. Thank you so much. Polywog turns into a shellback.
So that's the Navy. A shellback is a sailor who's crossed the equator.
Okay. And we were talking about I don't want to even say the word that's a slur, ultimately. Pete Jensen, thank you very much for the super chat. Hey, Natalie. Hey, never thought I'd see you two together. Me either. Learned of you from Schrodinger's cat, RIP to a real one. Keep up the great work, both of you. Thank you so much. Those of you who know who Schrodinger cat is, he was an amazing YouTuber who had over 100,000 subscribers. And then before he just passed away out of nowhere. And so we miss him every day. It's Dr. Jade. Hi, Dr. Jade. This probably needs to be a separate video, but I would love to hear an attorney going over Stephen Hassan's bite model of undue influence cult. This duo would be perfect. I've seen that model of cults. I've seen Stephen Hassan. And I think actually that's a good idea. Maybe comparing it to the different groups that have come to prominence. No offense, but the LDS Church has come to prominence as a potential cult. I don't think of it as a cult, but some people have bastardized the beliefs and done some really crazy things. Connections Classroom with the Jodi Hildebrandt case and Ruby Franke, Church of Scientology. There's just a few different things where we might be able to compare it to the BITE model and see, does it meet that criteria? Russ Hampton, thank you for the super chat. Do you think the DA's office will bring any more SA victims forward to go after Danny for the third one with all the recent public push? Ooh, what do you think about that?
Yes, I think that's a very strong possibility.
Mm-hmm. But they announced they weren't going to try to re-prosecute for the third young lady who it was a mistrial for.
But it was dismissed without prejudice. They could bring the charges again in the future.
Right. No, I'm just saying they made an announcement. So you think they're going to maybe potentially, now that there's public outcry, maybe try it again?
If more victims come forward, like realize there's victims who came forward that the DA's office decided not to bring charges for.
Yeah.
And I don't claim to be privy to why.
Mm-hmm.
If more victims come forward who the DA's office feels they can bring charges for, I do believe they would bring those charges and bring Chrissy right back in with them.
Okay. Aaron Hamilton has been a member for 10 months. Thank you, Aaron. So great to see you two together in one stream. It's been amazing. This has been an amazing stream. Pete Jensen, thank you for the super chat. My two favorite people learned of you, Natalie, from Schrodinger's cat. R.I.P. R.I.P. Keep up the good work. Both of you sent this twice. Love you both. Thank you so much. You're so kind. Katie did it. Thank you for the super chat. You are both my faves. Nat, interviewing Aaron is the best. Thank you so much. I wish I put my glasses on so I could actually see the super chats. April in Amsterdam, thank you for the €11. Hey, from Holland. Hello, Holland. Natalie, is the defense team opening the door to expert testimony an appealable issue? Ineffective assistance? Should we be worried? Nice to see you here. Aaron for SP Nation. Okay, so he can claim ineffective assistance of counsel, but that would fall under trial strategy. So it's not impossible for him to claim it as a post-conviction relief. Usually you would claim that in an appeal, or even after your appeals have been exhausted, you can then go and say it should still be overturned because I didn't get effective counsel. But the decision to say you failed to report it to the police in a timely fashion is just trial strategy. It might be bad trial strategy, but it's trial strategy. So it may have opened the door, but the judge could find, or the panel could find, that the attorney may have weighed the benefit of opening the door versus the drawbacks of opening the door, and they're allowed to do that. So we're not going to say that your case should be overturned. So I doubt that would be a reason, but that's just my analysis. Another attorney might disagree. Hey, Biggin. Thank you so much. It's a Biggin 2 raid. Biggin is another creator here on YouTube. Thanks, my Cozy Co. Caitlin Moore. Hi, my friend. How are you doing? This talk on responsibility sounds like PSI seminars, and it's so scary to hear about because it's everywhere in high control groups. So damaging. What's a PSI seminar? I don't know what that is.
I don't know.
No? Okay.
But any of the personal improvement seminars, a la Est, Landmark, Tony Robbins, they're all pretty much preaching the same stuff.
Yeah, I don't go in for a lot of that stuff because, first of all, it's made for the masses and we all have individual needs. And that's why I'm more a fan of like individual therapy with a licensed clinical therapist. But now you probably don't know anything about Jodi Hildebrandt and Ruby Franke. It's a rabbit hole. But anyway, licensed clinical therapist who is allegedly abusing children is one of the players in that case. And so that makes me very concerned for the public's feelings on therapists. But I shy away from the self-help stuff. It really concerns me a lot of the time. Colby, welcome to the Lawyer Chicklets. Rihanna Rodriguez, welcome to the Lawyer Chicklets. January Jenkins, welcome to the Lawyer Chicklets. Connie Philippakis, are you Greek, girl? Because I'm from New York and I know a lot of Greeks, and Philippakis sounds like a Greek name to me. Hello, Connie. Thank you for the super sticker. Morgan, thank you for the super chat. Ma'am, you have really been coming through with the lives and the great guests to match. Thank you for your time and hard work. I appreciate you. I appreciate you. Angela Bernhardt, thank you for the super chat. So much respect to you, Natalie, for tackling this topic. So many other creators won't touch it with a 10-foot pole. Oh, that's because I'm not risk averse. Okay. I don't give a damn about the Church of Scientology. Y'all are crazy to me. So love from a fellow Marylander. The KKF 1015. Thank you so much for the super chat. Casual criminalist first rule: never ever write down your crimes.
I know, right? Or record yourself doing it and post it to the internet.
Well, a lot of people like to do that.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Stephen Delaveau. Hello, my friend. Hope you're doing good. Do you think religions like Scientology and cults will eventually force the government to restrict some religious freedoms to the public good? I'm
Not
gonna
in
let
the USA, right? Not in the USA.
Not in the USA. That's what makes it so tough to regulate these things, because you have freedom of association, freedom of religion, freedom of speech. You can hang out with whoever you want to hang out with, even if they're hurting you.
Yeah.
And if you're an adult, it's even harder. It's like you chose to be there. That's how they see it. And that's really hard. Ken's channel. Hey, Ken. Thank you for having AA Ron on. New sub for you and the super chat. And the gnat that's in my room is driving me crazy. Susan B, thank you for the super chat. Hi, Natalie and AA Ron. Love the episode. Well, this one's for you. Kat, Aaron, can you explain that Danny's friends knew the Jane Does? That was a horrific detail when you explained the other day.
Oh, that's right. That's what we were talking about.
Yeah.
And then I got into the Ashley Ellerin thing.
Yeah.
It's that's what makes it so much more egregious. Well, for those who know, that the apology video goes, our hearts go out to all victims of abuse and everywhere. And you're like, we're not talking to you. You didn't write a letter in support of all in a trial that had to do with all victims everywhere. And that's where you go. It's almost like they can't bring themselves to just go, Jen, Nisha, Chrissy, we screwed up. We're really sorry. It was a mistake. And honestly, I feel like the outrage would go away, because what are you gonna do after that?
Yeah.
They were anyone as genuine as you can be.
Anyone that continues to harp on it would then be seen like they're just being petty and vindictive. Genuine contrition does help a lot,
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Kathy O'Toole, essay against children is treated the same in SO?
In the Sea Org.
Sea Org. Okay. That's sad. Thank you, Kathy. Victoria Wise, Scientology's influence and effect on all those people are just like a metastatic cancer. Your show keeps getting better. Thank you so much. I kind of thought of it like that myself, kind of like a cancer. Like it's everywhere. It's gotten into everything, and you just can't get it out. Equality. Hi, my friend. This is equally terrible and fascinating. Thank you both for talking about the case and the cult. By the way, as a person who speaks English as her second language, Aaron is very hard to pronounce. Oh, I can imagine with the two A's back to back.
Usually it's like Aaron.
Yeah. Yeah. Viking Crypto Warrior. Is there any way Xenu or Grant Cardone could break Danny out of prison?
You know who Xenu is, right?
I don't know. I think it's like a fake god, isn't it? Like a sci-fi god.
In Scientology on OT3, you learn that L. Ron Hubbard's story of why you've achieved the state of clear and gotten rid of your reactive mind, but you still have more stuff to handle, is that there's this incident, where Xenu, who was the galactic overlord, this overlord of the Galactic Confederation, or one of the planets, he had an overpopulation problem, and he called everybody in for fake tax audits, and he froze them in glycol, and he shipped them to Earth, and he blew them up in volcanoes with the hydrogen bombs. And those thetans are blowing around the winds of Earth, and they're really messed up. And you have tens of thousands of these body thetans. Remember, you and I are thetans, but these thetans are called body thetans because they're stuck to your body. And you have to telepathically audit them to get rid of their reactive minds. And that's what Scientology's upper OT levels is all about, is telepathically counseling these disembodied alien souls that are stuck to your body. And that's all Xenu's the one to blame for all that.
So they don't tell you that when you first join the cult, right?
They don't hit you with that up
There's
front.
No
Nobody
way.
would ever stay.
There's no way, because I've walked past places when I was a kid with guys sitting outside with little lie detectors, and they're like, hey, do you want to come on in and get a counseling session or whatever? They would
stress test.
Yeah, a stress test, because they didn't say it was auditing. They said it was like a stress test and it was therapy or something like that. They would set up outside of Grand Central Station in New York with these little tables, with these little, I was like a small child when they would do this. And we would walk past and they'd have a table with books on it and what's the name of L. Ron Hubbard's like big book? It's
Dianetics.
They would have like Dianetics on there and like something else. And people would just like come up to them because they were offering a stress test. Like, oh, is this a stressful day? Like, why don't you just come take this test? And so I know, well, first of all, I was like, oh, mommy, let's go talk to those people. And she'd be like, absolutely not. Let's keep going. We've got somewhere to be, like not probably analyzing what they're doing, but because it's New York and no one has time to stop. But I say all of that to say there's no way when you go up to the person giving you the stress test, they're like, and then Xenu locked the evil spirits in a case and put them in earth and volcanoes and blew them up.
But what's on the cover of that Dianetics book?
What is it?
A volcano.
It is.
And that's why.
Oh, man.
Gotcha.
Anything that you have to like work to get to like a certain level in order to find out the full story, that's got to be a cult.
It's supposed to be like subliminal imaging. It's kind of that this volcano will remind you of this thing that happened, 76 million years ago, and you don't remember it, but it's there, and this will you'll be drawn to the book, and you'll want to buy it.
The body thetans.
Body thetans.
Thetans. That's scary. Simi, thank you for this Canadian super chat. I'm scared. Edie, too, like, there's a bunch of like adult people that have like really important jobs that are in this organization, and they think that there's little people stuck to them from volcanoes.
Tens of thousands of them.
Aaron, do you think the cult will go after Nat now?
You might get some mean tweets.
I'll get some mean tweets. That's fine. Lady BB, would it be the first time or the last? Lady BB, thank you for the super chat. Goldie now has a buy me a coffee and wanted you to know. Thank you for all you do, BB. I don't know what that means.
Goldie's my moderator.
Oh, okay. Great.
Thank you, Lady BB.
Catherine S. Hey, Catherine. Hey, girl. Hey. Also, having grown up in Scientology, I've been so entertained watching Aaron describe things that used to be normal and see your eyes widen and blink rate go up. Cathartic. Yeah, and Catherine has shared that with us sometimes, that she's also a former Scientologist, and she's a great supporter of the channel. Thank you so much. Big Bull Beauty, two of my favorite YouTubers on one live. I'm dying. Jessica Holmes, being messy, but does Aaron think Megan's unwillingness to discuss his video linked to her camaraderie with Tony Ortega? You know what?
I don't think she was unwilling to discuss my video. She was unwilling to discuss the Ashley Ellerin subject.
Yeah. And
I understand that.
And she even said, and one thing, I'm not comfortable 100% because she's not here to discuss it. But I just want to clarify. She said, Aaron knows about that, and he's a former Scientologist, and he's speaking as a former Scientologist. So I would just talk to him about that. It's kind of what she said. She was like, I'm just not qualified to talk on that. And I think that that's completely a reasonable thing to say.
And it's true. And I can say shit journalists cannot say.
Right, exactly. And she said, as a journalist, I'm not comfortable with that. So I just don't think she was the right person for me to bring that up with. And I think that that's okay to admit that, and so now I'm bringing it up with the right person, and we talked about it.
Yeah.
Oops. Will Gunn, thank you. Could the families of the second and third serial killer victims sue Ashton? Ooh, I'll answer that. It would be it's probably way past the statute of limitations now, number one. Number two, they would have to prove through witness testimonies that he did not report her in a timely fashion. And number two, that the lies that he told led to her killer not being found, and that was probably intentional infliction of emotional distress. That's really the only thing that could really go to. And that's a really difficult claim to prove. Not impossible, just really, really difficult. So anyone can sue anyone for anything, but it's hard to prove that claim, even though that would be the appropriate claim. Alex F. Because if he did it to save. Ooh,
stay there.
Okay. If he did it to save himself and not to hurt the family, even though that was the outcome. And so if he didn't direct his behavior towards the family, it would be hard to prove. They really make that claim really, really difficult to prove. So that's why I'm saying that. Alex F, love this. Thank you both so much for everything you do. Oh, they love you here.
My audience turns it into a drinking game whenever my light goes. My battery on my light dies. It usually dies after about 2 hours.
Oh, okay. What is the BITE model?
I know what it is.
Go for it.
So Steve Hassan wrote a book. The one I read was Combating Cult Mind Control. That discussed the BITE model, and it has to do with high control groups that regulate and control your behavior, information, thoughts, and emotions. And I don't remember if he has a book just dedicated to the model or if he introduced that model in that book or an earlier book. But that's what it is. And I've had Steve Hassan on my channel and vice versa. Have you ever had him on?
I've never had him on. I've seen him on your channel. I should reach out to him because I'm really, really interested in how that intersects with the law. A lot of these high demand organizations are starting to have more than just your average somebody killed somebody. It's really starting to leak out into the law. These organizations that are controlling people and making them commit crimes or keeping them from reporting crimes. Scientology is not alone in that.
I can give you his email.
Thank you.
I would love to come on.
I appreciate that. So Wesley Hoke, welcome to the Lawyer Chicklets. Balance, repetition. Thank you for the super chat. Matthew Murphy. Hey, Matt. Is there any danger of a successful appeal for the 30-year to life sentence? Love you too on the same show. Thank you. I would say there's always cases can get overturned on appeal. It can happen. It's unlikely, as in statistically speaking, right? And so I have not seen enough of the trial to like look for any legal pitfalls or anything like that. But when they do file the appeal, they're going to attack the fact that Scientology was allowed to be brought up. They're going to attack the fact that the expert witness was allowed to testify. They're probably going to attack having all of the cases tried together. So those are just areas that the defense has probably objected to, and that's what they've preserved for appeal. That doesn't mean they'll be successful on appeal. And you have any thoughts on that, Aaron?
Just exactly what you said. The judge was remarkably detailed and meticulous in her responses to the objections, and you could tell that she was doing that to preserve the decision on appeal.
That's right. That's right. When you ever see a judge doing that, they know this case is going to appeal, and they're letting the higher court, this is why I'm doing this. This is the law that I'm relying on. These are the facts that I'm interpreting. Whenever a judge creates a very good record, it makes for a stronger case on appeal, or a weaker case on appeal, stronger case to stand up against an appeal. Big Bold Beauty. Hey, girl. Did you think any celebrity Scientologists will choose to leave over this? Well, I wanted to ask that too. Perhaps those who are aligned, like Jada, might speak out. I'm asking you that because I think you're more equipped. Yeah.
What's the funny thing about answering this question is there are so many people who are out now who I would have told you then would never, ever, ever have left. And so I'm at a point now where every additional little straw on the camel's back or extra little crack in the dam is something that I do believe might be what puts it over the edge for somebody. I mean, Will and Jada left a while back. They've already spoken out even, although they sort of deny ever having really been in.
Yeah, because they had Leah Remini on the Red Table Talk, and they were talking to her like they weren't actual Scientologists. And Will Smith made a whole Scientology movie. I don't understand why he's acting like he wasn't a I am very surface level with my understanding, but I saw the movie and I was like, oh, this is a cult movie. Like this is like Waterworld or whatever that was that John Travolta did. Like this is clearly, because there's no reason for him to make this movie. So I thought it was very clear.
Oh, you mean Battlefield Earth?
Battlefield Earth. Waterworld was Kevin Costner. Battlefield Earth.
Waterworld.
Yeah.
Yeah. Will and Jada I mean, they brought Leah on to basically be like, you should apologize to us for ever saying we were Scientologists. Is almost kind of what they were saying a little bit.
Yeah.
But they definitely were. But look, Laura Prepon has left Scientology. And
I didn't know that. She was Donna on that 70s show.
She left. Beck has left Scientology, and he was born and raised in it.
I was about to say he was in there for a long time.
Yeah.
I watched your video about that.
And I'm shocked that Giovanni is still in it. And that's why I was so disappointed to see his letter, because I was really, really, really hoping that he had distanced himself. Giovanni's daughter has left Scientology. but he hasn't. Anyway, we'll see. This is a big deal, and I think it will have ramifications as far as some people leaving.
Mm-hmm. But I have seen, so you want to compare fan groups and high demand religions or organizations. Sometimes people circle the wagons and they go internal when there's a lot of pressure on their group. So it could mean that people become even more strident in their beliefs and don't leave. So just because they're facing a lot of scrutiny doesn't mean they leave.
Totally true.
Balance repetition. Thank you, balance repetition. Aaron, Ron. I love to see you team up with Natalie again when you spill on Thorn. I'd love to see you all get into FOSTA, SESTA, and how law and LE harms. I don't know. I don't have enough context for these abbreviations. Can you help me out here?
Oh, I don't know what FOSTA SESTA is, but how law enforcement harms sex workers.
Oh, well.
So I've seen Thorn criticized for saying they're going after, essentially child abusers, but really they end up just going after sex workers and conflating sex trafficking with sex work and sex abuse with sex work.
Oh, I have a lot of thoughts on that. I'd have to research that, but that's actually a very dangerous thing that sometimes law enforcement does, where they treat the sex worker as though they are some criminal mastermind who's like responsible for human trafficking, and that's not right at all.
Right.
Okay. Hey, Meso. Natalie, there's a lot of new nice people in the chat. Niceness overload. Help. I love that. Thank you to all of you wonderful people from over at Growing Up in Scientology. I really appreciate you guys contributing to a lovely chat. I really appreciate that. Hey, John, I don't want to butcher your name. Thank you for the super chat. Isn't Grant Cardone going to jail next? Who the heck is Grant Cardone? Why does that sound so familiar? Who is that?
So this is John Sostovsky, by the way.
Okay.
Well known to me.
Okay.
Grant Cardone is the 10X guy. He's the he's a guru. He's an online marketing sales trainer guru, and he's a real estate guru, and he's an OT8 Scientologist and one of the biggest recruiters for Scientology. I've done a gazillion videos about him. And he's not being criminally charged with anything yet, but 2023 might be the year, maybe 2024.
Okay. Well, since he's a supporter of yours, let me try this. John Sostovsky.
So, but the V is but the W is like a V, so Sostovsky.
Sostovsky.
There you go.
Okay. Hey, John. Viking Crypto Warrior, thank you. Aaron, you have a good explanation, but never answered the question. Is there any way Xenu or Grant Cardone could break Danny out of prison?
So the answer is no, because Xenu is currently held up in an electronic prison in the Himalayas. So I don't think Grant Cardone could bust Danny out of prison by himself, and Xenu is occupied.
I'm going to leave that alone. Because it's like, I know that you're saying a thing that's from Scientology, but you so equally could just be totally making that up. And like, I'm gullible enough where I'll be like, I guess that's a Scientology thing. Like, you could tell me that you guys all wear pink underwear, and I would be like, okay, Danielle Fair, thank you. Chrissy Bixler has a civil suit. Why talk about a 20-year-old murder? She was in on the call and didn't call the police. Where is her lawyer?
It's not like Ashton said, I killed a girl. It was, we got multiple, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, multiple times removed from the thing. Like,
I think it's hold on, but I think it's also, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I think it's also the reason that we're talking about it here is because it begs the question, why is Ashton Kutcher potentially entrenched with the Search of Scientology, even though he's not a Scientologist? And if they're helping him to clean up things in his past, that could be compromised, and that could be why. And so I hope you get that that's the reason that we're bringing it up, not to be unnecessarily salacious. And if in any case there was that type of connection with the high demand religion, that person went on to write this glowing recommendation letter that included references to him not using drugs and you leaving your kids alone with him, and how he saves women when Masterson is accused of raping women. Certainly you would want to bring that up. That's a connection that has to be mentioned. And so I don't think that would hurt her in her civil case because, for like you said, it was that many years ago, but it doesn't disprove the fact that she was raped. Carolyn Dillman, thank you for the super chat. Aaron, do you think Shelley Miscavige is still alive?
Yes, I do.
I do too. I think she's like in some Scientology training center, like reading a bunch of books or something.
She's at she's at CST manning the vault.
Mm-hmm.
She's at the CST base in Twin Peaks, to the best of our knowledge.
Mm-hmm. You live in Clearwater, where the Sea Org headquarters are located. This is my question. Do you?
So it's not the Sea Org headquarters.
Oh, okay.
There is no headquarters for the Sea Org.
Okay.
But the largest Scientology organization is here in Clearwater. But it's not even managed. Like headquarters is in Los Angeles. Headquarters is in California. But it is the biggest Scientology organization.
Do you feel like ever uncomfortable, like living in Clearwater, where the biggest Scientology organization is located?
They're uncomfortable.
Love it. See, you're my type of guest, because that's how I am. Like, you want to follow me to the grocery store? Come on, we're getting avocados. Viking Crypto Warrior, thank you so much. Is there any difference between David Miscavige and David Koresh? I mean, I don't feel like David Miscavige is like diddling kids, and that's what David Koresh was also.
Yeah, David Miscavige isn't having a lot of sex. That's one big difference.
Yeah. So, Steph, between the Mormon preppers, connections, and Scientology, my mind is blown. Yes. Yeah, it's not the Mormons. It's the Mormon like prepper community that was running into some issues. Male Adams, thank you very much. Mally Adams, thank you for the super chat. An actress going to protect Scientology. Have you heard?
Protest Scientology.
Who is it that's going to protest Scientology?
I don't know. This vaguely reminds me of something I've read, but I don't know.
Okay. And guys, no more super chats, please. Jam. Aaron, there was talk that Tom Cruise is leaving because of For His Kids. Do you think this is true? I was going to ask you that too.
No, I even did a video dedicated to this. It's definitely not true.
Okay. Veronica, we need more Nat and Aaron streams. Please, pretty please. Lara FM, it's so nice to see this being talked about on other channels other than ex-members. Thank you for your platform from all of us ex-Scientology kids. Oh, that's sweet.
Lara's a friend of mine.
Oh, CBS 230. Hi from a small town in East Texas, and it is now a deal here. Amend 143 on books now for upcoming elections.
I don't know what that's about.
Me either.
Oh, maybe that has to do with our the question that was asked whether religions will ever be, whether legislation will ever be passed to rein in the religions or something like that.
Oh, I'll have to look into that. That's interesting. Thank you very much. G Rivera, thank you. Hey, Aaron. Ron, they love that. Great to see you both working together. How close are people to at the CC? Do you know if Juliette Lewis knew Danny? I like her work.
Oh, yeah, no, they traveled in the same crowd. They definitely knew each other. How close are people at the Celebrity Center? My understanding, I never spent hardly any time at the Celebrity Center, but my understanding is that, and you guys know how celebrities are, and you know, they all have their own cliques and everything. It's extremely cliquey. I mean, well, I gave the example of Lisa Marie had her crowd and Danny had his crowd. You know, you have the Jenna Elfman was arguably a bigger star than Danny. Of course, you've got Tom Cruise, who doesn't really have a crowd, but he does have the people who work for him, and they sort of create their own little clique. So, and the truth is, in Scientology, you don't really have friends because all the friends are spying on each other. So you can't really confide in anyone, with some rare exceptions. But yeah, I mean, it's not like everyone at the Celebrity Center is just one big family. You know, it's just.
Is there a famous person that you can think of that's like, I'm thinking of John Travolta and Tom Cruise. So like, we all know that they're Scientologists, right? But is there like maybe they're like flying under the radar, but they're super famous? A famous person you could think of that's a Scientologist that a lot of people would be surprised about?
No.
Because you know that they're Scientologists.
Yeah, you're not really. Only Will and Jada were the first two people I became aware of who were allowed to actively lie about being Scientologists. Usually you're not allowed to do that. Xenu told me to give you this super chat. Nice.
Kurt is my friend. Hello, Uncivil Law. He has a channel here on YouTube, and he discusses a lot of legal topics. Great commentator.
I've seen his channel before. I've seen it.
He's a hoot. I was just on his channel the other day. Thank you, Kurt. Not going to even try. Thank you so much for the super sticker. Oh, my eyes are crossed at this point. All right. Aaron, would you like to sign yourself out at this point in time? And I'm going to thank you and everything, but I just want you to tell the people where they can find you and everything.
Absolutely, guys. I'm on YouTube at Growing Up in Scientology. So
Right.
This has been a blast.
Thank you so much for joining us, Aaron. Thank all of you so much for joining me. And if you're unfamiliar, my name is Natalie. I'm a criminal defense attorney, public defender here based in the state of Maryland. And I provide legal commentary here on the YouTubes, as well as some sassy clapbacks. I can't help myself. All right, so I'll see you guys later. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'll see you in the next video. Stream over.